I am going to go ahead and kick this off, if that's all right. Are we ready, admin? Thumbs up. All right. Well, I know Jordan has a lot to say about himself and his path and his journey. So I don't want to ruin, because I know him well, and I don't want to ruin any of his amazing stories. But you're about to hear from this amazing humanitarian, a director of help for refugees that he created, this NGO. And I think one of the most impressive things about Jordan is that after high school, he decided to take a gap year. He just literally decided he wasn't quite ready to go to university, and started working in South Sudan. And then in university, after being inspired by a professor and learning all that was happening in Syria, he went off to learn Arabic. I don't know if a technical term, dropping out of university, but felt his path was destined and meant to be in Syria, helping the refugees. This is a man, folks, who really has a heart. And when you think about the skills that it takes to run an NGO and to go off and do these things and just drop your education and your learning, there's a certain skill set that's necessary for that. But this is a man whose heart has led him on a path that is just incredible. And he's here to share that with you all today. And so I leave it to Jordan Hattar. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate that introduction. I guess I would like to start before I get into kind of sharing what I've kind of found out to be the recipe for success. So I'm in Jordan. My name's Jordan, but I'm named after Michael Jordan, the basketball player. So my brother's name's Michael. I'm Jordan, And my sister was almost named Ariel, like Air for short. So like Michael Air Jordan. But my mom didn't let that happen. So my sister's name is Megan, but I just grew up loving basketball. And, but I'm here in Jordan working on refugee projects. I've been here since they shut the airport in mid-March. And, today when I was walking, I ran into, just a short story, I ran into this guy. He was salvaging the things out of the garbage dump, big garbage cans here in Jordan. And that's how he's, and I just started thinking, what a tough life. And he was talking to me in Arabic. My Arabic's not perfect. And he was scared of, there were dogs that we're on this mountaintop, and there's a lot of stray dogs. And, I'm just thinking, as we go about today, thinking about the qualities of, that we want to, and the people that we want to aspire to be like, I think it's really important to remember that no matter, even if we reach our definition of success, or even if we reach, and some people, and I'm sure out of, the people here today from all over the world, you guys will reach your dreams and influence a lot of people. And it will be in part because of these qualities, some of which we'll talk about today. Determination, consistency, but I think it's also really important to remember, and this is where the story connects for me, that part of the narrative, no matter how much we say it's because of hard work or determination, part of it will always be based off chance and luck and circumstances. And as I ran into this guy, his charisma was incredible, and it's still with me 3 hours after the running into him. And I think it's just really important to keep people in mind that part of it will be based off circumstances, and try to lift other people up. So I'm just going to share some pictures with you guys. Okay. Let's see. Can you guys see this okay? The recipe. Okay.
Looks good.
Thanks. So yeah, that's me when I was 12 years old on the right, in the Kobe Bryant jersey. And my dream was to play professional basketball. And I think it's really, I won't share all my story, but I think I realized starting in 9th grade that there's more to life than just sports. And that was through learning about the genocide and the conflict in Sudan, and then learning about different conflicts around the world. But I think it's really important to have dreams and goals. And in order to reach our dreams, I think one of the most important things is persistence, to take risks. And working on the Syrian refugee crisis, I wanted President Obama's administration to care. And so all my emails and different things, I didn't feel like it was working. So I tried to intern in the White House, and here's a screenshot of all the different times I applied over the course of, 4 years. And I got rejected the first 7 times. I had 4 phone interviews. I guess I failed on all the phone interviews. And the 8th time, I still didn't get in. As you can see, it even says, I think it says processing on the one I got in on, fall of 2016. And I decided that I would just book a flight to Washington, D.C. So I flew from LA to DC, and I just decided I would just show up there. Even though I didn't have the internship, it was President Obama's last 4 months in office, and it was my goal to influence Secretary of State John Kerry at the time to do something more about Syria. Aleppo, the largest city at the time in Syria, was just being pummeled. And I ended up, a couple of weeks, I had already booked the flight, even though I didn't have the internship, but I ended up getting the internship on the 8th try and got to intern with Michelle Obama and work on her education initiative. She's one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. I got to sit right outside her office and just hear a lot of her daily conversations, which reminds me the importance of diversity. And she was really focused on making sure that we had other opportunities of not just doing, the work we had to do. So I led the intern class on foreign policy, international relations. And part of that stemmed from my own experience in MUN. This is a picture, it's kind of blurry, but that's with former Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon. That's in the Zaatari refugee camp. So I came here to, as Andrew said in the introduction, I came here to Jordan. I took a semester of leave from university, and I'll share more about why I did that, but I was a journalist, and they wouldn't let me into the refugee camp unless I was a journalist or if I worked for the UN. And I had done model UN conferences, and I had been on the press team, so I thought, okay, I can do this. And actually 9 months earlier at BMoon in Bonn, Germany, I was on the press team asking my friend who was, pretending to be Ban Ki-moon. And 9 months later, I was actually asking him questions in this press conference. But he didn't answer any of my questions. What I realized is he went to Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC. He knew who to, his secretary knew who to ask, whose questions he needed to answer. And they didn't know who I was. So I just went up to him afterwards. And the reason I did that is because I felt like I had stories from the refugees that needed to get to him. And so I was sharing stories that week about how tents were there were 100 tents blown away. And I remember this 65-year-old man, his grandfather, and his 3-year-old son, Ahmed, died the night before in the Zaatari refugee camp. And he said, there were protests the next day against how bad the conditions were. And he's told the international media it's not a protest, it's a plea for help. And so these stories were real to me. They still are. And I just wanted to try to humanize the situation. But I think that's one thing in terms of trying to reach our dreams, just not being afraid. The other thing I think that's really important is creating our own definition of success. Not going to a friend, we can take up parts of other people's definition, but this for me is really important. This is part of my definition of success, quote by Maya Angelou. It's, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. For me, it's not just about the end result. It's about, how you treat people along the way. Do you use people, making sure we use people as ends in and of themselves, not means. And in addition to having our own definition of success, for me, one of the biggest things that of most importance is having mentors. This was my boss in Michelle Obama's office, Eric Waldo, and he inspired me with his train of thought. I learned from a previous intern that she said, I think he just hires for kindness. And I said, what do you mean? And she went on to explain that, you know, she's like, Jordan, they get thousands and thousands of applications. This work can be done by a bunch of different people, but he wasn't necessarily taking the person that went to an Ivy League school. He said, you know, his message was, you know, follow your passion, not prestige. And the interns that he hired, I went to Long Beach State. A lot of people haven't even heard of Long Beach State. She went to University of Michigan. And so it reminded me that part of it is, you know, sharing our passion with others. And another mentor of mine is the guy I lived with in South Sudan, Deng. Deng's story is incredible. He walked over 1,000 miles when he, at 6 years old, fled his village, ended up in one of the largest refugee camps in the world in northern Kenya, Kakuma refugee camp. And I was trying to figure out how I could make a difference. I had done fundraisers and organized events, but I wanted to actually meet the people. And I met Deng my senior year of high school in San Francisco. And he said, you know, you don't always need a specific skill to make a difference, just a heart. And that's why at the end of the day, he said, okay, come with me. I don't care if you're 18 years old. So 2 days after I graduated from high school, I went with Deng to South Sudan. We were working on a project to build a medical hospital in his parents' village. But this is the one piece of advice I've really held on to over the years. And I would say the most crucial step of, you know, the recipe you could say for success is just trying, starting to begin on the path. You know, let's say our path is trying to become a diplomat. Well, you don't need to receive all of, you know, you don't have to have your bachelor's degree or master's degree or all the skills in order to at least start. You just have to, I think, have to believe in yourself and find someone that is willing to, you know, show you the ropes. And when we're exploring, you know, which path do we take in life, one of the inspirations I get for this is by Simon Sinek, and he has this TED Talk, and it's how great leaders inspire action, and he talks about the why and how important it is to be driven by something. I heard recently, you know, that events, we don't choose events, events choose us. And when something moves us, that's that time when I think we have to act. And so by why, I mean, what's your purpose? What inspires you? And for me, how I got involved in the refugee crisis was by meeting my Arabic teacher. She's on the left there with her husband and her 2 daughters above her. And my Arabic teacher, she's the first Syrian I ever met. And she would always talk about Syria, but Syria was, you know, this distant place to me. And our class had a strategy. The first 15 minutes of class, we would talk about Syria, so we wouldn't have to learn Arabic right away. She would speak the first, you know, describe what was happening in Syria in English. But everything started to change once I learned more about her story. And this was 2011, 2012, my first year of university. And she told us about her 2 cousins. I went to her office after class to get extra credit, and she was crying. And I said, you know, in Arabic, Ustad Shu Malik, what's wrong? And she went on to tell me that 2 of her cousins were shot and killed in Damascus. And what was so tragic about it was they were helping someone. You know, as they were it was a 19 and 20-year-old, two boys, and they were helping their neighbor who had just been injured, and they had their lives taken from them. I think their lives were also taken from us too, though. I really felt that, and that's what really motivated me to get involved in the Syrian refugee crisis. I'll just share a couple more quick stories, and then we can get in some Q&A and just discuss this a little bit. As I was leaving the White House, January of 2017, I met the guy on the left, Arne Duncan. He was President Obama's Secretary of Education for 7 years and a really good friend of President Obama. He asked me what I was going to do after the White House, and I said, I'm going to Jordan, working on the refugee crisis. But I remember talking to him for 3 minutes. I was really nervous, and I said, a bunch. I got an email the next day, and my boss said, Arne Duncan wants to talk to you about what you're doing in Jordan. He would love to come. And I was shocked. And at 24, 25 years old, I was being asked by Arne Duncan and I ended up taking him and his family here to Jordan in the summer of 2017. And as I'm dropping him off at the airport after this full week of programming to get to know, for him and his family to get to know the refugee crisis. And now he, among other things, he works in Chicago on race relations and crime, but he also partners with Steve Jobs' widow and on Emerson Collective. He does some incredible work, and he was trying to find out how could he help. But what really inspired me is at the end he said, I don't know what it was. We just talked for 3 minutes, and he had never met me before that. He spent 3 minutes with me, and then here I was taking him and his wife and 2 kids to Jordan. The only understanding I can come up with is, that I was sharing why I got involved. I told him the story of my Arabic teacher and why this was the next move for me. And it reminds me that, our passion is contagious and other people can see our passion. So we have to try to follow our passion and not just do something to put it on our resume, put it on our CV. This is a little bit more about, making sure that we align with what we're passionate about. I can share a video a little bit later this is from the TED Talk by Simon Sinek. And one of the things I think that is most important in creating this recipe for success and living the life that we want to do is trying to go outside the box. And so I wanted to share this short video by actor Denzel Washington on what he thinks is needed in order to, make a difference in the world. Can you guys see this video? Awesome. Let's see. Clicking it, but it's not working here. Okay.
I was sitting in my mother's beauty parlor, and I see behind me this woman under the dryer. And every time she looked up, every time I looked up, she was looking at me, just looking me in the eye. I didn't know who she was, and I said, she said, somebody give me a pen, give me a pencil. I have a prophecy. March 27, 1975, she said, boy, you are gonna travel the world and speak to millions of people. Now, mind you, I was flunked out of college. I'm thinking about joining the army. I didn't know what I was gonna do, and she's telling me I'm gonna travel the world and speak to millions of people. Well, I have traveled the world, and I have spoke to millions of people. But that's not the most important thing, the success that I had. The most important thing is that what she taught me and what she told me that day has stayed with me since. If you think you want to do what you think I've done, then do what I've done. Fail big. Fail big. You only live once. Take chances. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test, was 9 dots. And you had to draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots without lifting the pencil. The only way to do it was to go outside the box. So don't be afraid to go outside the box. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to fail big, to dream big.
That video just keeps going on, but I'll copy and paste the link in our chat too. Go back to okay, sorry about that. So just a couple more points. You know, for me, that what Denzel Washington said is really it. You know, just knowing that we're gonna fail, expecting it. After I left the White House, I had a job offer to keep working with Michelle Obama's initiative, and everyone in my life, including my own dad, everyone was saying, you need to take that offer in Washington D.C. But then I was also getting messages from different people that said, your work on refugees is more important now than ever before. That you have to remember, this was the refugee ban, January 2017. People said, you need to share these stories. Stories like that I heard in the refugee camp. I met a group of young men from a suburb of Damascus in Syria, and I asked them what they needed the most. I'll never forget, they said shaving razors. And I said, why do you need shaving razors? They all started laughing. They said, so we don't look like Daesh. Daesh, the Arabic acronym for ISIS. So I felt like I really, so I just went on a speaking tour around the world. I didn't know how I would do it. And so much of the last 3 years, I've been going around the world sharing stories, working with different schools and universities on service and how we can help. And one thing I've realized, won't go too much into this, is part of the problem is how people view refugees. One of the things, it's not always a physical need that refugees need, but many of my Syrian friends, they just want to feel welcome in the societies that they live in. So a few takeaway tips that, if I had to summarize, my story on what I really believe in, I think starts with a belief in ourselves. And we have to be really motivated by something in order to keep going, because it can get really discouraging, of course, at times. And then the other things I've kind of mentioned already before. The last point, be able to say no. I think that's really important. Being able to walk away from just about anything. And for me, that included a whole year where I didn't really do much of anything other than find things that I didn't want to do. It was the year after I graduated from university, and I had that quote that my mom shared with me by Maya Angelou. Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And it helped me because I was able, even though had to walk away from some things that, I had an internship with Bill Clinton's foundation, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. And the advice I was getting was stay in it. But then I realized, I don't just want to be unhappy. I want to make sure that I'm doing something I'm passionate about. So that's just one example where I wrestled with it at the time, but looking back on it, I'm very happy that I chose that. I guess my last point is, when we're thinking of success, to me, it's about what kind of legacy we want to leave. My Syrian friend, who you see there on the right, on the picture on the left, he's on the right. Picture with me on the right, he's on the left. He's now a junior at Georgetown University. Really inspirational story. His name's Saria Samaki. He's from Aleppo. He was kidnapped by 2 different groups in Syria at 15. His message is really inspirational, and he reminds me, Jordan, we won't at the end, we won't be remembered by what we do for ourselves. We'll be remembered by what we do for others. And if we can merge that into our definition of success, I think the world would be a better place. So if you guys have questions, I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you guys would like to talk about. I think we've got 20 minutes left.
So thank you, Mr. Jordan, for that very enlightening presentation. Indeed, it's inspired us all to actually think of things in a different way, and it's really something which we should all contemplate on in the coming days. Let's now open it up to questions. So as I can see, the chat is full of questions. So I've made a set of questions from the chat, and I've made a set of questions from my own side, which contemplate to add on to a lot of questions from a lot of delegates and collect them into one question. But let's go into the delegates' questions first. I'll be calling out your name. Please unmute yourself, ask your question, and then mute yourself again. We have Dorcas joining us from Nigeria. Dorcas, his question is on low self-esteem.
Yeah.
Hi, Dorcas.
Hello.
Hi, Dorcas. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Jordan.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Okay, my question was, how can you deal with low self-esteem? Yeah, nice to meet you too. Your story was very inspiring, and I got a lot of, what's the word again? I got really inspired, and the thing is, each time you just go out there, you just have a whole lot of low self-esteem. You're not good enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do this and all of that. So the question is, how can you deal with that? Thank you.
That's a great question. At first, it was, it's a battle, and I think the first failure, for example, when I was of the 8 times interning with Mrs. Obama, the 8 different tries, the first one, getting the rejection, it probably hurt the most. And then, I get inspired by different people by people in the history of the world and current people living. And there's this, there's this one really good video on Netflix by Brené Brown, and it talks about the call to courage. And I think, for me, Dorcas, what I keep remembering is my experience in South Sudan. And there was this boy I didn't share this today, but there was this boy that was stung by a scorpion on the bottom of his foot. He was 3 years old, and he was fading in and out of consciousness at the time. And I called a doctor. We figured out that we didn't have the right medicine in South Sudan to treat for the scorpion bite. And there was actually a pretty good 50% chance he would die, 50% chance he would survive. And I think it reminded me how precious life is. And it reminded me to kind of get over my own insecurities and say, okay, if I'm remembered for failing a bunch, that's okay. But I want to make sure that people like Maru have a voice in this world and that they're able to live a life. Because I feel like if we're able to have a childhood, everyone should have a childhood. And if we don't work towards other people having a chance in life, it makes life itself less valuable. And so keeping my mind on people, on stories of real people, that's my whole motivation for, wanting to get into President Obama's White House to begin with. It was to meet with President Obama and his team on Syria and South Sudan and share the actual stories. Yes, they're getting all of the intelligence reports. Why are they going to care about this 23-year-old that thinks, he has stories? Well, I really believe in stories. And I think it's not that people don't care often. It's that people don't know what's going on. So long answer, but those are some thoughts.
Thank you, Dorcas, for the question. Thank you, Mr. Jordan, for the answer. I've just come across something very interesting on the chat, and this is a student who writes that you had attended his school, and he mentions the name of the school. Surprisingly, I'm from the same school. So Mr. Jordan, I
Yeah.
believe you had gone to Doha 2 years back and you were in DPS, and that
Yes,
happened to be high school as well. So,
very
something-
cool. Yeah, small world. I
So
had such a good time in Qatar. Yeah.
Qatar is brilliant, but we miss the place. I'm in Singapore now. Anyways, let's now go into a few other questions. William had asked a similar question to the low self-esteem part. William is from our press. William, I hope your question is also answered here. Let's now go into another question from Mihir from Bahrain. And this is very interesting because he talks about the search for a mentor. Like you mentioned about the importance of a mentor. And finding the correct mentor, searching for the right mentor, something to do with that. So Mihir, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so Mr. Jordan said that a mentor is very important. So I'd like to ask him that what is the defining motive of having a mentor and what are the qualities required in him?
That's a great question. For me, it comes down to one thing. It's someone that inspires me. And that started with someone actually coming to my high school. His name's Carl Wilkins. He might have spoke at some of your guys' schools. He was the one American that stayed in Rwanda during the 1994 genocide. And besides having someone that inspires us, having maybe someone whose path we would like to follow, go down their path maybe one day. But Carl Wilkins, he's 30, 40 years older than me, but we've become best friends, and it's nice to have a different opinion because in high school, all my friends, my immature friends were saying some things, and then Carl was sharing other things. And it reminded me of the importance of having someone, at a different stage of their life, and also values, core values that you may have something in common with. For Carl and I, it's this, it's this desire to bring out to feel empathy, to feel other people's pain, and to the importance of listening to people's stories. Great question.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you, Mihir, for the question. Another question coming in from negative thoughts, especially when they come from people around you, your colleagues. So that's a question coming in from Doreen. Doreen, are you in the house?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Jordan. Thank you for that presentation. It was very interesting and helpful. So my question is, how can someone wanting to start working on their project deal with negative thoughts, judgment from others, or the fear to start in general?
I love your question. That's one of the best questions I've ever heard too. And I think the ending, especially how to start. I think sometimes it's finding out who's already working on topics that you care about. I was in Hong Kong working at French International School, and there was this guy at year 11. He was the only one that cared about, there was a certain topic he cared about, but no one at his school, he couldn't get a school club. And so we ended up connecting him with other schools. And I think that's one of the most incredible things about this summit. For me, Model UN was not just learning UN procedures and discussing topics I was passionate about, but lifelong friends, people that I want to work with. And so just finding a small net, Margaret Mead's quote, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can make a difference. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And being very careful, since I'm very sensitive myself, Doreen, so I know what, criticism can really, and judgment from others can really tear us apart. But then having a few people whose opinions matter a lot, in terms of they know you, they know your intention, and going to those people instead of just listening to all the white noise. Because I think you're right, there's there's some people in this world that will just they'll always be maybe some people that just want to throw criticism instead of actually, taking action. The one thing I do know is we are gonna mess up when we're trying to take action, and I could share different stories on how I've messed up too. And I think just learning from that and knowing that, you know, we don't know it all, but we can learn from people that have already tried before us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorian, for the question. Thank you, Jordan, for the answer. Now there's a question which has been recurring a lot, and I just want to put it across to you in a collective form. You know, it's been a very consistently asked question over the years that when students want to pursue a career path and they want to find their calling, you know, so there's so much to do in today's world, and you know, you have so many skill sets. And the very recurring question in the chat, I just like to ask you, plain and simple, how do we find one's calling? How do you connect with something? I know it comes naturally, but what is your take on it, seeing as you have had experience in life?
You know, and I face that sometimes. I mean, I remember being in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in February before the pandemic started, and I was at a school, and I remember someone coming up and saying, you know, you should really care about, you know, you shouldn't be focusing on Syria right now, you should be focusing on this instead. And they have I was listening, they have a point. You know, there's always things going on around the world. I didn't share this in my slides, but I was bringing caravans, these box houses, to the refugee camp. And I partnered with the UN. They're in charge of the refugee camp because, you know, everyone was living mostly in tents at the time. And basically people were telling me, why do you do this? You can't just pick 2 families that get these caravans and then everyone else is left without caravans. And so I almost didn't deliver the caravans after fundraising $6,000 with a group of friends. I think it was my sister that reminded me, you know, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you don't do something. Just because we couldn't deliver caravans for every family doesn't mean that it wasn't worth, you know, pouring our heart into these 2 families. And the one thing I really believe in is ripple effects. And one of the stories that motivates me to keep trying to do small things is after these students fundraised and delivered 2 caravans with, you know, hard-earned, you know, fundraising money, governments from around the world gave 20,000 caravans to this camp. And now every single family in this camp has a caravan. There's no more people living in tents. Right? And that was a big deal because of, you know, kids were dying every single week because of the conditions. And so there's always going to be things that pull on our heart. And for me, that's what it's all about. You know, if something pulls on our heart, get to know the stories and, you know, see how we can partner with other people. You know, it's not like I looked at a map and I was like, oh, let's go to the Syrian refugee camps. Let's go to, South Sudan. That's, you know, that's the spot. It wasn't like that. It was South Sudan I learned about from my 9th grade geography teacher. And I wanted to meet the people. And part of meeting the people and kind of gaining credibility is learning language, of course, I think is really important. If you're gonna, you know, so I would bring my dictionary to the refugee camp, you know, and I would sit down with the kids and they would teach me Arabic and I would teach them some English. And spending time with people is really important, I think. But there's always gonna be people that say, why don't you do something else? But just learning about situations. For me, it's about awareness and then persistence and heart. I had a guy ask me to put 3 things on a business card when I was 18, and those were the 3 words that just came to mind.
Truly inspiring. And I think that just reiterates the importance of a mentor. The mentor, in the 9th grade, your geography teacher implicitly became your mentor for a lifelong journey. So at the end of the day, it comes down to a mentor. Again, another question which I've collected and put into one question. In today's world, we need to be quite straightforward about this because it's quite sugar coated, but it's the reality. And that's, in today's world, a lot of the youth, a significant chunk of the youth, have become very economically driven. And whatever it is they wish to do in their lives is all about making money and, you know, settling down and then having a great and lavish life and not really giving back to society. It's maybe not all of us, but a significant chunk of the youth is like this. So especially in today's world where you yourself mentioned that it's important that we ourselves make it, try to help others around us who need it. How do you think we need to convince the youth? Where should it start from? Should it start from grassroots levels? And what are we doing wrong in the current scenario, which is resulting in this type of demographic thought?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think we're hearing each other. I think sometimes we want to be heard before we want to listen. And sometimes I just feel like it's a bunch of shouting. And I think, you know, we have to sit down and hear other people's grievances and what their concerns are, because we all have different concerns. You know, for me, it's, you know, I think back to, you know, I'm a big Martin Luther King fan, and you know, he talks about the, you know, 3 dimensions of a complete life, and he talks about, you know, he talks about the recipe for success in the first dimension, kind of following your own aspirations. The second one, he talks about living a life of service to others, and the third, he talks about having some type of, whether it be moral compass, spiritual, religious, something grounding us. But I think it's figuring out how to lead by example. Mrs. Obama, that was her last message to us. Her last speech in the White House, she said, you know, lead by example with hope. And, you know, if we see something wrong in the world, instead of just calling it wrong, you know, and telling someone else to do something about it, figuring out how we can use our skills. I've seen, you know, so many incredible projects on, there was these students in Barcelona, and their passion was art. And so they created this eye-to-eye project, painting rocks from a Greek island where refugees were going and having those proceeds. So I think it's figuring out where our greatest passion intersects with a need in the world. So asking ourselves, you know, what do we care about, and how can what we care about maybe make a positive impact?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And with that, we will be concluding the session. Thank you very much for joining in, Jordan. And it's
so
really inspiring hearing you. And this is something I say from the depth of my heart. That certainly it is something we have enjoyed hearing. And this is one of the best sessions I have attended in a very long time. Thank you
that
so
means
much.
a lot. And if any of you guys have any other questions or any projects, I'll put my information up, and I'm happy to work with you guys on whatever you know, passion projects you're working on.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope all of us have been really inspired from this. Mr. Newman, are you still there?
I am. Can I close it out with a remark here?
Absolutely.
When I first met Jordan in Qatar several years ago, and then again in Shanghai recently, what impressed me most about Jordan is his honesty. People gravitate towards people who you just know are being honest with you, we're listening. And Jordan has that quality. And I think when people like the education secretary, in just a 3-minute conversation, knows who they're dealing with when someone can be honest with them. I have a great story about a former student who was in an interview for a diplomatic position, and there were dozens of people interviewing for that position. And when they said they got the job, and the people who hired him basically said they asked one question in that interview, and they know they can't answer it because they don't have the degree of education to really, don't have the experience in the job to answer that question. And so they just want to see how they're going to tackle that issue that they've asked. And later the people told him, you were the only person we interviewed who answered us truthfully, in that you said to us at the very beginning, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but then continued and just said, here's what I think. Everyone else tried to fake it and tried to just answer it as if they knew. And so what I love about Jordan is that truth and that honesty in his person, and that he's led by his heart. And he has been incredibly successful as a result of that. So if anyone's looking for a mentor, looking for an NGO to join, Jordan is a tremendous individual. So Jordan, thank you so much for spending time with our participants, our delegates, and we really appreciate you.
That means the world to me, Andrew. Thanks for that. I mean, this is the next world. These are the next world changers, you know, and people that are spending their time being on this platform right now. It inspires me.
You're a rock star. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, with that, I think we have to close out this session. There is a social hour. Amina, you want to share a little bit about what's happening?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know about this, but there's a social hour happening now. As soon as we wrap up the session, there's going to be a lot of activities happening. So you guys be sure to go there and check out what the community building team has prepared for you. They've been working on this very hard, so I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So just don't hesitate to go there. And also, I'm going to drop the link to the help desk one more time if you want to go and ask any questions about the MUN Impact Program. So if you want to ask the program leaders any questions or just any questions about the summit, feel free to go there. I'm just going to add the link one more time. And I'm not sure, have you guys not received the link to the community building session in your emails?
So if you've registered for the session, you'll receive an email. If you haven't, then I'm afraid you won't. And yes, the help desk is 24/7 open. You're interested, there'll always be one representative from all our programs, and you can learn all about our programs. I'll probably be there for the whole day.
And
thank you
Mr. has
so
dropped
much.
his email in the chat once again. So if you guys want to reach out to him with any projects or ideas, feel free to do that as well.
Great. Thank you, JD, for being the MC, for my admin, for just doing a spectacular job coordinating this day. Thank you all. All right. All right, with that, I'm going to click leave room. End meeting for all. Thank you all. Jordan, thanks again.
Thank you guys. And
Guys,
thank
at
you
the community
Ethan.
building session.
Bye.
Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone.
And we'll see you all tomorrow. And oh, if you're in the social hour, then in the next 15 minutes.
Exactly. Got 2 more days of Global Summit. Bye-bye.